Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Burris. I'm the facilitator for the California Water Quality Monitoring Collaboration Network. I'm also the coordinator for the Clean Water Team, the Water Board Citizen Monitoring Program. Today's webinar is Ephemeroptera, the Mayflies, a really important benthic macroinvertebrate that we monitor for. Today's presentation is being given by Dan Pickard. Dan is a biologist with the Aquatic Bioassessment Laboratory at Cal State Chico. He's also with SAFIT. Dan has over 30 years of experience working with benthic macroinvertebrates. He's been all throughout California doing sampling. He's run programs outside the state of California. Now, I'm really delighted that he's going to be bringing us this presentation. One of the things that he does at the Bioassessment Laboratory is manage the sorting and taxonomic identification of what's in benthic samples. So he's one of the experts here in California. If you have questions for him, go ahead and drop them into the chat. He's going to be monitoring the chat. I'm going to be looking at the chat. And then after the presentation, you're free to also unmute and go ahead and just ask a question of Dan. Thank you for joining us. Really looking forward to the presentation. We have an announcement before we start that the California Bioassessment Work Group is going to be meeting again in conjunction with Cal SFS, the Society for Freshwater Science. The meeting is planned for October 28th, 29th at Cal EPA in Sacramento. I don't have any registration information for you. Please not just check your email, but subscribe to the SWAMP program so that you can get those notifications. So you can go to the State Water Resource Control Board's website and then click on subscriptions. We have a whole lot of programs. Look for the SWAMP, the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, bioassessment. Click on that and subscribe so that you get the information. If you already subscribe to the Clean Water Team's emails, I will be forwarding that information along. So looking forward to participating in that again. Dan, this time, if you'd like to load up your presentation.
Thank you all for coming. I apologize for the technical difficulties. As Erica was saying, my name is Dan Pickard. I run the Aquatic Bioassessment Lab here in Chico. We do the benthic macroinvertebrate samples for the SWAMP program, the statewide program, and most of the regional programs as well. And we do those samples here in Chico. Been a bug nerd for a long time. When Eric highlighted the fact I've been doing this for 30 years, makes me feel old, but such is life, right? So, so today we're going to be talking about the mayflies, and we'll go ahead and get started on this. A couple of years ago, I think it is now, I did the same style of talk on order level differences of aquatic macroinvertebrates. And today we're focusing on family level characteristics for the mayflies. So the mayflies themselves, they occur in all freshwater habitats, lakes, rivers, wetlands, streams. Basically, where there's water, you're going to find mayflies. But the greatest diversity in that order are found in cold streams with good water quality. They're highly sensitive to pollution. And along with the Plecoptera and the Trichoptera, so the EPTs as we call them, those three groups, those are the most important three groups in inferring water quality. And we use them extensively in measuring water quality. Sure. Okay. So that talk I gave about the order level characteristics, I just want to remind you, okay, what makes a mayfly first, and then we'll start talking about families. So Mayflies in general will have three tails, or cerci. And this organism here, you can see the three tails. They're kind of put together or sucked together from this preserved specimen, but they're there. Gills. So all these organisms are animals. They have to breathe oxygen, and one of the ways they do that is through gills. So often the placement and type of gill is order specific, and in our case that we're going to see today, it's often family level specific as well. So the gills are going to be on the abdomen, and they're either going to be dorsal, which means on the top of the abdomen, or they're going to be lateral, coming off the edges. One pair of visible wing pads. Often some of these will have a second pair of wing pads kind of up underneath, but you don't really see them real well. And then at the end of the leg, the tarsi, there's going to be one claw. So one of the things I wanted to do with this is just give you an orientation on the morphology of these things, because you're going to see this morphology later in the talk. So on the top of the organism, this one's oriented bottom to top. The head is on the top, and then the thorax is where the legs come out. That's the easiest way to know what the thorax is. It's where the legs come out of the critter. So mayfly morphology, you've got the head up top, the thorax is where the legs come out. You can change the slides on your end, but otherwise, if someone wants to share. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. I'll just have Eric change the slides for me. That's easy enough. And then the abdomen, which is where the gills are found on mayflies. And at the very end, you have the tails coming off the end. So go ahead and change slides, Eric. Oh, you did? Okay, so sync to presenters. There we go. Maybe that'll work. Okay. Family level characteristics for mayflies are going to be dependent on a couple different things. One is going to be the shape and the shape of the body itself, and kind of the shape of the head. Secondarily is going to be mouth parts. And probably the most important thing for mayflies and their family level differences are going to be the gill shape, type, and placement of the gills on that bug. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Eric. Excellent. Okay. So we're just going to jump right in here. The way I've organized this is based on some of the dichotomous keys that are out there, and it's really restricted to the California taxa. So there's a bunch more mayflies in North America than there are in California. There are a number of families that we don't even see in California. So this talk is really limited to what we see in California. The first thing that falls out in almost any key, and what I'm going to go over today, is the family Heptageniidae, or Heptageniidae, depending on how you want to pronounce it. These are the ones that I call the big head, big eye mayflies. The body and the head are going to be flattened, and as you can see on this critter, can you guys see my pointer at all? You probably can't, right? Okay, that's okay. Things will be pointed out in other slides too. That's fine. But the head is really big, and the eyes are really, really prominent. The gills are plate-like, and they're either on the edges of the abdomen, but some actually extend underneath the abdomen. This is one of the families that has an exception to the three-tail mayfly rule. Of course, every rule has an exception, right? So this family is one of the families that has an exception. There are some genera in this family that only have 2 cerci. Unfortunately, they're some of the more common ones, and they're found in really nice streams, so you want to be aware of those, and I'll point those out as we go on. And, this family has quite a few different genera in them. So in this talk, I'm trying to give some examples of that sort of diversity within a family, but I'm also going to point out if there's only one genera or one species in a particular family. So go ahead with the next slide, Eric. So here is what I was talking about with the arrows pointing to things. This again is another heptageniid. Notice the big head, big eyes, flat body. The gills are plate-like, and they're on the abdomen. This is one of the ones that only has 2 cerci. If you notice on the left of this slide where I pointed out the cerci, there's only 2 there. This is the genus Ironodes, so that's one of the ones that has 2 cerci. Go ahead with the next slide, Eric. This is the genus Epeorus, also again, but remember we go back to the family level characteristics: big head, big eyes, flattened body, gills laterally on the abdomen. But this is the one, if you see on the right hand picture, I've pointed out where those gills actually come together underneath the abdomen. Okay, no other questions, so we're good. Okay, Eric, next slide. So the way this is gonna go for each family, I'll kind of give a little introductory thing, and then we'll get to some specific characteristics, and then kind of a little summary slide. So the summary slide will be this kind of thing. So where do these guys live? The heptagenias, they live in fast-flowing riffles usually. They like higher oxygen levels, so the riffles and the faster flowing areas of the streams are where the oxygen is much higher. These guys generally are scrapers of algae, so that's what they eat. And like I've said before, these guys are very intolerant and indicate good water quality. So if you have heptageniids in a sample of yours, that's indicative of good water quality. Okay, next slide. Again, anyone, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and Eric and I will try to answer them. This is really an informal talk, so if you have a question, just let us know. Okay, the family Ephemeroptera. These guys are burrowers in fine sediments, and their body is not flattened like those of the heptageniids. It's more rounded, and it really appears hairy. You can see all the hairs on the image of this critter that I have here. The head have tusks, which you'll see a better picture in the next slide, and the abdominal gills are fringed with hairs. And I've pointed them out here in this slide, but we'll get a better view of those here on the next slide. So go ahead and give me the next slide, Eric. So this is, I've pointed out those fringed gills on the family Ephemeroptera. You can actually see the dark line running through the gills. That's the trachea extending up into the gills, which allows the oxygen to get into the body. Next slide, Eric. So here I am pointing out the tusks. And again, they're going forward from the base, basically the mandibles up in front of the head. There's one other family that can potentially have tusks, but we'll see that here in a little bit. So those are the tusks of the ephemerid. Go ahead with the next slide, Eric. So where do these guys live? Well, they live in lakes, ponds, and large silty rivers. Again, these guys are burrowers, so they'll make a rounded burrow in the silt, and they'll kind of move their body and undulate it to get the water flow through there. And they basically feed on the particles that they can ingest from that water flowing through their burrow, basically. The genus Hexagenia is the only one here in California. So if you have an ephemerid, you know what genus it is. It's Hexagenia. If any of you are fishermen out there and have ever heard of the hex hatch, these are the critters you're trying to imitate with your fly. And these guys are big. They're big critters. And the hex hatch often is a massive thing, especially in Central North America and Eastern North America. These can be they can be seen on radar. Actually, it's pretty crazy. So that's the family Ephemeridae. Go ahead with the next, Eric. The family Leptophlebiidae are the forked gill mayflies. Their bodies are rounded. They're not minnow-shaped. We'll get into some minnow-shaped mayflies here in a little bit. They have more of a crawler body shape, so it's kind of a little bit more broad. It's not skinny like a fish. That's the minnow-like body shape. These guys are crawlers. Now, the gills on these guys are going to be on their abdomen, and they're going to be in various shapes that are forked. And by the shape of the gill, you can often tell what genus it is just by how the forks are found in the gill. This is a family that also one representative has tusks, and I have a picture of that here later. But this is a pretty diverse family. There are quite a few genera in this family, and we'll have some representatives of each of those. At some point, depending on people's feedback about what they might want to see in this series of talks later, we may even go down to generic level characteristics and things like that. So that's something that feedback from you guys is going to be wonderful. As far as if you want to see more of these sorts of talks, we can definitely do that. So go ahead to the next slide, Eric. Again, another genus of Leptophlebiidae. This is the genus Leptophlebia itself. And you can see that there's kind of a heart-shaped gill there with an extension. So it's kind of a heart shape with an extension on top. That's what the gill looks like. Go for the next, Eric. This is the one that has the tusks. This is Paraleptophlebia, and it's the Bicronuta group. We do have these in California. They are in most western states, so Washington, Oregon, and California, and extend out into the Rockies too, this particular type. But it's pretty crazy to see that I think those are mandibles that they've modified to become tusks like that. And then I just have one more slide. Next slide, Eric, please. Of the difference in forked gills. This is the genus Neoleptophlebia. The forking on that gill doesn't go all the way to the base. That's how you tell what genus that is. But all of these guys have some sort of forked gill. That's what defines that family, is that forked gill. So go ahead, Eric. So these guys are usually going to be living in fast-flowing riffles, but I have also caught them sometimes in aquatic vegetation along the edges. They usually are scrapers of algae, and in general, they're pretty intolerant to pollution. So again, if you have these guys, they're pretty delicate too. Often, one of the problems with this particular family, those gills fall off very, very easy in a benthic macroinvertebrate sample. So often you'll see it's a leptophlebid, but they don't have the gills. So those can be kind of hard to determine sometimes. Let's go to the next one, Eric. Okay, the family Isonychiidae. This used to be in the family Oligonuridae, but they made it into its own family. We're getting into the set of mayflies now that I call, that have the minnow-like body. You can see how this guy's laterally kind of compressed this way and looks like a little fish. And these guys swim really, really well too. So any of these mayflies that have this minnow-like body, and you're going to see a few families here, are extremely good swimmers. So minnow-like body, the thing that distinguishes this family from any other family, though, are the rows of long hairs on the front legs. Now, if people have used a dichotomous key before and seen this character, rows of long hairs on the front legs, you may look at the specimen and go, oh yeah, those are hairs on that leg. Wait till you see what the picture looks like. You won't mistake that. So, rows of hairs on the front legs. The antennae are short. They're not longer than the length of the head. They've got plate-like gills on the lateral edges of the abdomen. So go ahead with the next slide, Eric. So on the right here is the foreleg of one of these critters that I've dissected off, and you can see how obvious those hairs are. They're almost as long as the segment of the leg that they're on. The way these guys feed is they hold those forelegs out in front of them in the current, and they filter fine particles on those hairs, and then they feed off of those hairs. On the left, you can see the plate-like gills of these guys, and these guys are big critters too. So a number of these swimming mayflies are pretty big compared to some of the others. Let's go ahead with the next slide. So again, they feed by filtering the fine particles out of the current, and they use those hairs on those front legs. They're usually large, they're very good swimmers, and they're found in swift waters, usually of medium-sized creeks to bigger rivers. We get them up here in Chico, in Big Chico Creek, up in the reserve. That's one place I know I can find them. This is monotypic in California. Monotypic means that there's only one genus and one species of that genus. So there's only one. If you find an Isonychiidae, you know it's Isonychia velma. So it's the only member of this family in California. Now that's specific for California. There's a bunch of different species in the east. Go ahead, Eric. About halfway through. Okay, we're doing good on time. The family Ameletidae. These again are minnow-like mayflies with a minnow-like body. They're extremely good swimmers, and they're larger mayflies. Like I said, most of these minnow-like mayflies are larger. The one distinguishing characteristic for Ameletidae, though, is the maxillae, which is the mouth part, with a set of comb-like spines. So there's these comb-like spines, and you see it on the picture that I have in the next slide. But that is the best character for the family Ameletidae, is that comb-like spines. And you can even see those spines in very immature specimens. Once you know what you're looking for, you're like, oh, that's the spines. Okay. These also have short antennae. They have plate-like gills, but these gills actually have a sclerotized ridge running across the gill, which most of the other mayflies don't. So the labrum, which is basically the front lip of these guys, it's invaginated, but it's not a true notch. So you'll see that's a difference between these guys and one of the other families we'll see a little bit later. So go ahead and advance, please, Eric. So on the left, I've dissected out some of the gills, and you can see that sclerotized ridge running across the gill. The picture on the right, you see the antennae coming off the head. They are not longer than the head is. And then, wish you guys could see my cursor, because right where the ends of these arrows are, you can see those comb-like, can you see those? Okay. You can see the comb-like spines on the maxillae. And again, even in really small instars, that comb-like spine is very evident. Another little anecdote to these guys. Often their tails, so their cerci, there's 3 cerci, look banded. There's a dark band sometimes on those tails. I didn't actually put that in the characteristics. It's more of a observation than a true character. I'll go ahead with the next slider. So these guys are collector-gatherers in feeding habitats, so they're not scraping algae, they're not filtering things. They're just kind of eating stuff off the bottom. And that can be kind of detritus, it can be smaller organisms that they may be able to ingest, but that's what collector-gatherers, that's how they feed. These guys usually live in quieter water habitats or among vegetation. They are very good swimmers. If you take a benthic sample and you throw it in your dish, and these things are just scooting around really quick, those are probably amyletids. They're either amyletids or betas. They live in high quality water and they're intolerant to pollution. The genus Amyletis is the only genus in this family. So if you have an amylete today, it's the genus Amyletis. There are a whole bunch of species and they haven't figured out how to tell the species apart in the larvae. So don't worry about that part. Okay. Go ahead to the next slide, Eric. Cyplinuridae, again, these are another minnow-like mayfly. And again, these are very large. They are swimmers. They have the short antennae, plate-like gills. So they're similar to both the amyletids and the isonychiids, but cyplinurids do not have that comb-like spines on the maxillae, and they don't have those filtering hairs on the arms, okay? So you may think you have one of those others, but if it doesn't have the filtering hairs on it, or it doesn't have the spines on the maxillae, it's going to be a cyplinurid. And these are actually some of the biggest mayflies that we see out there. Go ahead with the next slide, Eric. So the one on the left, pointing to the maxillae, and it does not have those spines. The one on the right, very large plate-like gills. These are some of the largest gills that we see in mayflies. Go ahead to the next slide, Eric. These are collector-gatherers. They live in lakes, large rivers, and quiet area of the streams. And these guys are very tolerant, especially to oxygen, or to the lack of oxygen, I should say. Sometimes these guys can be even in isolated pools that have been cut off from the flow. They can live out the rest of their life and become adults in these pools because of those huge plate-like gills. They're very good at absorbing oxygen, so they can live in lower oxygenated environments than most of the others. And Cyplinurus is really, I say, the only common genus. We don't probably ever see anything else. So it's more than likely Cyplinurus if you have that family. Go to the next, please, Eric. So the last of our minnow-like body swimming mayflies are the batids. So distinguishing characteristics of batids: the antennae are long. They're longer than the width of the heads. So the other 3 swimming mayflies, their antennae are small. These guys have long antennae. Plate-like gills, the labrum on these guys, which is that front lip, these are the ones that are going to have a true notch in that labrum. And these guys have a whole lot of different genera. It's a very diverse group. So go to the next slide, please. So here we've dissected off just a head on the left to show you really how long those antennae are if you're just comparing those with the head. And then on the right, the labrum, that top lip, so to speak, I've pointed out that really distinct notch there. The other families, it's going to be more like an invagination. It's not going to be a true notch like this guy is. So the antenna and the notch, that's really the characteristics for the betids. Go to the next slide, please, Eric. Another example of one of the families of the betids. This guy is one of the ones. So in the family betid, here's another family that we sometimes have the two-tail exception to the three-tail rule. This is the genus Acentrella, which kind of found more in larger rivers, like we get them in the Feather River and the Sac River up here in Northern California. But the general body shape is what we want to look at. The antennae are longer than the head, plate-like gills along the side. So that's what makes it a betid. Go ahead to the next slide, Eric. I think this might be the... Yeah, okay. So these guys are collector-gatherers. They're very good swimmers. This is the most common mayfly family in California and probably the whole United States. Betids are definitely, you're going to find hundreds of them in just one kick net sometimes. They're very, very numerous. They can live in lakes, they can live in large rivers, and they can live in streams. They're generally tolerant to pollution, but can also be found in extremely pristine sites. So these guys are ubiquitous, I like to say. They're everywhere. Kind of like midgets are, but they're everywhere. And it is a very diverse group, or a very diverse family. A lot of different genera, lots of different species. Again, the most common mayfly we find out here, and most common thing you're going to see in your benthic samples by far. Okay, next one, Eric. The family Ephemeroptera. The distinguishing characteristic for this family is the plate-like gills that they have on the abdomen start on either segment 3 or 4 and go through segment 7. They'll often have paired dorsal tubercles on the back of the abdomen, and these are crawlers. They're not the minnow-like ones. So you can see they're kind of more broad, and these guys have a lot of different genera and some of the wackiest, funkiest looking bugs that you'll see out there. I really like this family of mayflies. So go ahead to the next slide, Eric. So here, the guy on the left, I've numbered the abdominal segments starting from the thorax for you, and you can see the gills start at the very back end of segment 3. You can actually see the dark little suture where the gill comes out. But I've pointed out where the tubercles are and where the gills are. These are two different genera, but they're both in that same family. It's because, you know, the arrangement of those gills. So go ahead to the next slide, Eric. Just showing you the diversity of this group. This particular critter, this is Timpanogga hecuba. It's an ephemerellid, but I've numbered those abdominal segments there, and you can see that the gills don't start until the end of the 4th abdominal segment. So go ahead with the next slide, please. This is one of our more common ephemerellids that you see, especially in pristine streams. This is Drunella doddsii. The bottom side of this guy has this disc of hair that they use to adhere to the rocks. So these guys absolutely live in very fast-flowing riffles, highly oxygenated, and they use that disc to suck down onto the rock. but they're really common in benthic samples that are taken in really nice streams. Go ahead to the next, Eric. So this family in general, they're scrapers of algae. They live in many different habitats, but most often you can find them in swift-flowing riffles. They're generally intolerant to pollution, but some, like the genus Ephemeroptera, can be anywhere. They're pretty ubiquitous. So the tolerance varies quite a bit in this family particularly. I think we only have a couple more families left, Eric, so let's keep going. Oh, back one more. There you go. The family Caenidae, or Caenidae, depends on how you want to pronounce it. The biggest thing for these guys is the gills are square operculate, which means book-like. So they kind of are like this, book-like, right? And they're covering segments 2 through 6 and the smaller gills underneath. These are a crawler body type. They're generally pretty small. Go ahead to the next slide, Eric. And this is, I'm pointing out those operculate gills there. So operculate, they're hardened, they're sclerotized, they're hardened, and there's frilly gills underneath. And they are square-like and they overlap. This one you can actually, just as a side note, you can actually see on the right-hand side of the photo, you can see the adult wing pads starting to transform or to grow within the last larval shell, the darkened wing pads there. When you see any mayfly larvae with really dark wing pads, that means it's going to become an adult very soon. Anyways, just an aside, sorry. Next slide, please, Eric. So collector, gatherer, and feeding, they live in lakes, ponds, and slow-moving sections of streams and rivers. They are very tolerant of low oxygen and pollution in general. You can often find them in very silty sorts of situations, often very large population in lakes. And the genus Caenis is the only one here in California. So our last family, Eric, go ahead, are the Leptohyphidae. These also have operculate gills that cover segments 2 through 6, but these are triangular in shape. This used to be in the family Trichorithides. It's changed to Leptohyphidae now. And these are a crawler body type as well. So go ahead with the next slide, Eric. So here I am pointing out those operculate triangle-shaped gills. We didn't have the best specimen to take photos of this, so I'll probably do better photos and include them in this talk in the future. But again, like the Caenids, last slide, please, Eric. Collector, gatherer, feeding. They live in silt, detritus, and gravel of lakes and streams. They are tolerant of pollution, including very low oxygen levels and sedimentation. So you kind of find them in the muck on the edges or in the backwaters of rivers and streams, but they're found in lakes too. Trichorithides is the only genus in California. So with that, that is the mayflies of California. So that was my last slide. So at this point, we're what, 12:20, so there's about 10 minutes left in the scheduled time, and we can answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah. If you like, you can unmute and ask Dan any of your questions. You can also submit them via the chat. So you have a question from Chelsea. Would you say the best way to get familiar with these species is to just get out there and search them out?
I mean, a lot of these guys are going to be found in most any streams. So, you know, just kicking around, just even turning over rocks, you can find them. And you know, a lot of these, one of the things that I try to do with these talks is point out characters that you don't necessarily need a microscope to see. Some of these are, like when I pointed out big head, big eyes, it's really obvious, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the best way, is just to get out and experience them. Some of these characters, like the crown of Maxillion on the Amelidas, though, you definitely need a microscope to see. So um, we have a question. Can you expand on the tubercle and Ephemeroptera? How do they have a function, and how does their placement determine identification? So the placement will determine identification of the different genera. So how big the spines are, how are they on all of the abdominal segments or only certain abdominal segments? Those are very, very useful in generic level determinations in the ephemeralids, is those tubercles. As far as function, um, I don't know per se if there's any real functionality to them. Some of the bigger mayflies have really large tubercles, and those would be the ones that the fish love to eat, especially. So maybe it's defensive, but I'm just kind of speculating at that point. But their placement and their size definitely determines um, are used in both generic and species level determinations.
Yeah,
You could,
thank you. I'm struggling to formulate an exact question, but I'm kind of wondering if benthic macroinvertebrates are more habitat or environment specific than geographically specific. Could you speak to that a bit?
So I would say both geographically and habitat specific. So there are some groups of benthic macroinvertebrates that we don't have in California, right? Like I said, the ones that I presented here aren't the total number of families that are found in all of North America. So you have that kind of wide range. But then you also have within a stream, you have even a lake, but a stream more so because it's more heterogeneous. Um, you have all sorts of different habitats and microhabitats. So these guys, benthic macroinvertebrates in general, have learned really how to partition those ecosystems down into really microhabitats and exploit those different characters of the microhabitats. Like for instance, the Isonychiidae, they like to orient themselves facing the current, right? Because they're filtering the particles. There's a Diptera family called, they're black flies, and they filter the water as well, and they're on the fronts and the tops of boulders. If you take that boulder with those black flies on them and put them into like a backwater area, they'll leave. They'll bail, get off that boulder, and go find one that's in the flow. So I would say it's on both levels, and I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
we have about a minute left before we'll close the webinar. Any other questions or comments? Dan had asked earlier if you'd like to go into further detail, finer taxonomic resolution. If that's something that is of interest to you or your program, please let us know. Email Dan or drop a message into the chat.
Right. So one of the things here, this is kind of the first in a series of these talks that we're planning on having, through Safed and Eric's group, with all the different aquatic macroinvertebrate orders, or at least insect orders, I should say. We're not going to include the non-insects as of yet. So, we're doing the photography here in our lab, and thanks, Jim. We're doing we're taking all the photos here in our lab from our reference collections, and dichotomous key with line drawings is great, but sometimes actually seeing the stuff it makes a difference. So this should be in a group, the first in a series of seminars that we're going to do.
Thank you all for joining us. We're going to wrap up the webinar now. Again, if you have any questions, follow-up, feedback, we appreciate that information. You can send it to myself, Eric Burris, drop it in the chat before we formally close things, or email Dan Pickard, who did a fantastic job of telling us about the mayflies. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thank you, guys.